Hello, welcome again to the Go for Ball podcast. I'm Big Italy 42. He's Scott Mailwig at Sports 25 to Life. Talking about hot hitters, cold hitters, trends, and everything as we do. So starting off at catcher, Buster Posey's still your top dog, and it's really not even close. We had Stephen Vogt was off to a nice start. Really struggling right now. But Buster Posey at 325. He's got 14 homers, 67 RBIs. Striking out just 8.6% of the time. I mean, he's priced like it finally, but he's the guy that you want to pay up for if you're paying up. Outside of that, it's Russell Martin when he's at home or when he's, really even on the road against bad pitching, but especially at home where the Blue Jays are literally just unstoppable right now at home. I mean, Martin's got a 224 ISO on the season with 15 home runs. So there's actually been quite a few guys now that are up here in the mid-teens in home runs at catcher. So normally when you can punt, you can at least get a guy with some power.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, McCann has a 208 ISO on the season. He's a guy we talk about all the time, using him against righties. Votes up there at 186, even though he's cooled off quite a bit lately, down to 268 in batting average. Derek Norris is another guy that keeps getting closer and closer to minimum because he's down to 238, but he's got a decent amount of power too with a 170 ISO, 12 home runs on the year. And we've got guys like you mentioned, really cheap guys with some power like Salvador Perez, Mike Zunino, some of the other guys like that that have been in decent spots at times. I mean, with catcher, it's just the same thing. I mean, you're looking at the matchups each day more than anything. There's just so few elite catchers, and now that Posey's been so elite, it's like really tough to get him in your lineup. Even Russell Martin's getting pretty expensive at times too.
Yeah, especially on DraftKings. He's been the most expensive guy there quite a few times now.
Yep.
But, it seems like now there's so few good options, especially in your cash games each night. It's pretty much you find who's in the best matchup at best price, and you're going to be hard-pressed finding other options because there's pretty chalky plays a lot of times at catcher and cash games now. All right, first base options. We don't need to tell you who's at the top. You already know who's at the top. It's Paul Goldschmidt. I mean, he's just having a ridiculously good season. 22 homers, 67 runs scored, 77 RBI, 17 steals, 258 ISO, batting 347. The guy's putting up MVP numbers, having a hell of a year. An interesting guy, not too far behind him, who was up there among he and Miguel Cabrera for a while. Anthony Rizzo really struggling over the past, I'd say, 2 to 3 weeks. Had a couple nice games recently near the end of the week, but his overall numbers are still solid. Batting 284, 18 homers, 56 RBIs, 14 steals, walking a nice amount of 11.3%. But, I mean, his price tag right now, though, I mean, he's almost a must-play against righties in cash games.
Yeah, at least on FanDuel.
Yeah,
I mean,
FanDuel, I should say.
He's been a really tough guy to pass up at times, and he's finally started rewarding some people over the last couple games. Like you mentioned, Goldschmidt's going to lead the way the whole season. Votto's been red hot and is still nowhere near his numbers. I mean, it's just been incredible what Goldschmidt's been doing all year. It'll be nice if we can get Miguel Cabrera back in the Tigers lineup at some point because he was just on fire before he went down. A couple other first basemen that have been hot lately. Jose Abreu, along with the rest of the White Sox lineup, he's up to 17 home runs, getting really close to 60 runs and RBI, hitting 295 on the year now. His numbers look a whole lot better than they did a week ago. Outside of that, Brandon Belt's been really rock solid all year, although it would be really nice to see some more power out of him. Only 10 home runs on the year has been kind of disappointing. Speaking of guys who have disappointing home run totals, Joe Mauer only at 6, hitting 274 has been just a major disappointment at first base for the Twins. I mean, he's not a good enough hitter at this point to play first base. It's pretty ridiculous, honestly. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what the Twins do with him going forward. Chris Davis is a guy that has gotten hot again. He had a 2-home run game this week, 25 home runs, 69 RBI in the year, hitting 244 now with just a 295 batting average on balls in play. Davis is having a really nice season.
Yeah, and he was a guy that people were kind of overlooking earlier in the season, but definitely starting to get it going. That whole Baltimore team starting to hit a lot better now. And then we definitely have to mention Mark Teixeira. I mean, he and his insane power, 299 ISO still on the season, and still 249 batting average on balls in play, but at 263. So, if he gets a little bit more batted ball luck, I mean, he's putting up monster numbers, 26 homers and 67 ribbies. So definitely a good year for him. And then looking down here at the bottom, I would say, you tell me your take on this, I would say the worst starting hitter in all of baseball over the past probably 3 weeks has been Adam LaRoche. I mean, not only is he not getting hits, not getting on base, not participating in this White Sox hot streak, but I mean, the guy's striking out like 2 to 3. I think he had a 4 strikeout game too. I mean, he has been horrible.
Yeah, it's been really rough for him. I mean, he just might be done, honestly, which is kind of sad for the White Sox considering they just signed him last offseason, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he just has not provided any protection or any RBI potential behind Abreu basically all year. I mean, he's been hitting fourth in that lineup like 95% of the time, and he's only got 35 RBIs hitting behind a guy who's hitting 295 now. I mean, it just has not been a good season for him. Another guy that's been having a rough year, Mike Napoli, has been a little bit better, but outside of having some decent numbers against lefties, he's just struggled a ton. 208 batting average overall, 12 home runs, 37 RBI, only a 251 batting average on balls in play, but I just don't see his season turning around very much. I mean, he's basically a guy you can only play against really bad lefties right now.
Yeah, and really only in tournaments for me, too, because, I mean, he's just so inconsistent. And one more guy I'll mention who's actually really catching up. He's got 8 home runs in his last 6 games, had a 3-homer game and a 2-homer game. Lucas Duda, strangely enough, has really good splits in lefty-lefty this year and significantly better at home than on the road. So whenever Lucas Duda's at home and or facing a lefty, I love targeting him in tournaments because he's finally shown that power upside. Seems like he does this every year. He struggles with his power stroke first half of the year, and then he hits about 20 home runs in the second half.
Yeah, right.
I mean, that's just the tail of the tape with him. So
yeah.
All right, second base, Jason Kipnis, still your most consistent hitter. D. Gordon is batting 2 points higher, but I'm not counting that. Kipnis, the much better all-around hitter, if you ask me, has now had 2 different streaks of 3 straight games with 3 hits. I mean, the guy's just been a great patient hitter all season. You want to watch good at-bats, watch Jason Kipnis bat because, I mean, the guy doesn't have a lot of power, 154 ISO, just 6 homers, but, I mean, he always gives you good at-bats, always puts the ball in play. So he's a fun guy to watch. That offense, though, struggling at times. He does have 66 runs scored, but I feel like a lot of those are in big games where he scores 3-4 times. Yep. And, I mean, the consistency's not there with the rest of the team. But as far as other guys at the top, I mean, Jose Altuve is definitely your next best guy. He's got 28 steals now. Not much ISO 125, but, I mean, you're obviously not expecting that out of the little Jose Altuve. But batting over 300, whenever he's facing a lefty, he's still just the play that you want.
Yeah, I mean, just to highlight how good Jason Kipnis is, he's third in ISO at second base, first in walk rate, first in on-base percentage, second in runs scored behind Dozier, and I think he's 5th in stolen bases. So, I mean, he's just having an absolutely fantastic year. And like you said, in a lineup that hasn't been great, he could easily have 70, 80 runs scored right now at the top of a really strong lineup. I mean, the Indians have been using some ridiculous guys at cleanup this year. I mean, Ryan Rayburn's been hitting there against lefties all season, which is probably their best option. But the problem is they don't face lefties all that often.
Yep.
But when they're facing righties, it's like David Murphy, and they had Brandon Moss in there who was having like a career worst season, who they finally traded.
Yep.
I mean, they just have not found an answer in that cleanup spot against righties, and it's made it really tough on all the guys hitting those top 3 spots because Santana got it going a little bit, and there was just no one behind him. And, I mean, even Brantley's been having a pretty nice year, but with no one in the 4, 5, 6 spots, hasn't had the runs scored that he probably should.
Yeah, and RBIs, I mean, all those things. If there's nobody on to bring in or no one to bring you in, then that's going to hurt your numbers. So, other guys to consider here that have been having pretty good years, Logan Forsythe, especially against lefties, is actually having a really nice year. One of those guys that seemingly nobody ever talks about, but whenever he's facing lefty, he's in play for me. And still fairly priced everywhere, so you got to like that. A few other guys, Robbie Cano, not so much over the past week, but definitely over the past month has been really starting to turn around. He was the butt of a lot of jokes over the first few months of the season. I think he had 2 home runs in the first 2+ months, up to 11 now, 263 batting average. So he's finally turned around. But then that you kind of mentioned was Brian Dozier. I mean, he's having a monster season. Lefty, righty, doesn't matter. We know he's great against lefties, but almost the exact same ISO against righties, too. So if you're looking for power, I mean, it's a no-brainer. That's the way you go.
Yeah, and, I mean, the crazy thing about Dozier is for a guy that, I mean, he has above-average speed. He's not a slow guy even by second base standards. He's only got a 278 batting average on balls in play right now. I mean, if he could get his batting average up to 275, which is where it would probably get if he was around the league average on batting average on balls in play, I mean, he would be far and away the top second base play every single night. And I think at some point in the second half that's going to happen where there's like a 2-week stretch where you basically just have to play him at second base, which is kind of what I do anyway for the most part.
Yeah,
but it's going to pay off a lot more at some point in the second half.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, and he's still priced, I think, much lower than he should be on FanDuel. So I'm taking advantage of that while I can. DraftKings always kind of has him priced around $5K against lefties especially. So not much value to be had there. Shortstops now. Troy Tulowitzki finally got the hell out of Colorado, and now he's in Toronto with, I mean, one of the best lineups I've probably seen in my lifetime now, if we're talking like top to bottom. So, I mean, they have everything. Every one of those guys. And we saw it yesterday with Gianna Navarro in the 8-hole hitting a home run. Seen Ryan Goins at the 9-hole having a couple of good games. They've been batting Tulo leadoff. He had that huge game in his first start. So you got to expect that Tulo is just going to start putting up enormous numbers. He was way too cheap for about 2 days there after the trade. That didn't last long. So, I mean, he's back to the status where you not only want to play him, but you don't have to wait for a good situation for his teammates because it's pretty much always a good situation for the Blue Jays right now.
Yeah, definitely. And him hitting first in the lineup is going to be great. I mean, we're going to see a ton of 5 and 6 plate appearance nights from him in the second half of the season. Like you mentioned, playing in Toronto, not really a huge downgrade from Coors. Obviously, definitely a downgrade, but I mean, with the other bats around him in the lineup now, it almost makes up for it because, I mean, especially when they were on the road, the Rockies' lineup was pretty bad this year, honestly. Yeah. Against lefties, they were really bad. I mean, they were struggling all over the place. And, I mean, Tulo, as we mentioned, looked terrible at times. And he was still hitting 300 on the season when he got traded. So I definitely think he's in great shape the rest of the way. A couple other guys at the top here. Xander Bogaerts continues to hit at the top of the lineup for the Red Sox. He's hitting 316. I mean, he's not providing anything like special in terms of home runs or stolen bases, but he's around 50 runs and RBIs, so he's an interesting option. Some of the cheaper guys, I'm guessing Segura is probably going to hit towards the top of the Brewers lineup again now that Parra is out of the picture. So. I would think he probably hits leadoff every day, so he's probably going to become a pretty interesting option, despite the fact that he's been hitting 8th and 9th a ton, and he's quite a bit behind, like 50, 60 plate appearances behind some of these guys due to injuries and stuff. I think he's 5th among shortstops in stolen bases with 15. So he's going to be a nice upside guy the rest of the season. Brandon Crawford's another guy that I think is going to be an interesting option. He might actually move down in the order, though, if the Giants keep acquiring people. It'll be interesting to see what he does the rest of the year, but he's been pretty consistent as the season's gone on. His batting average isn't great, but if he can stay around 270 with the power that he displays for a shortstop and 63 RBI, which I think leads shortstops if I'm looking at this correctly, he's a solid option. The only thing that brings him down is where he hits in the lineup, and I wish it was higher, but he's been pretty comfortable in that 6-7 spot most of the season. So whatever works, I can deal with.
Yeah. And one other guy to keep your eye on second half, went through a nice little stretch about a week ago. Hasn't been great, and has overall been one of the bigger disappointments in all of baseball. Ian Desmond, batting just .217, but he does have 11 homers now, 45 runs scored. Now that lineup's finally healthy, you got Jason Worth back, Anthony Rendon back. I'm not sure when Denard Span's come back, but I think it's going to be pretty soon as well. Obviously, still Bryce Harper in there. So once that's a healthy lineup, you got more RBI chances. I mean, it's not going to be as many times where he's batting 7th and there's just no one on base anytime. So Desmond's definitely got to look. I mean, keep your eye on him because he's right about min salary, especially on FanDuel right now. And, you know, if that lineup starts putting up some runs, he could be a really nice value.
Absolutely.
All right, third base options. I mean, it's Josh Donaldson's the guy that I want to talk about. I mean, you got Yunel Escobar and Matt Duffy both hit better than him as far as average goes. I mean, Matt Duffy's been a great play recently, showing a little bit of upside as well, batting right ahead of Buster Posey. And that Giants lineup, especially against righties, really been raking. But Donaldson's having a monster season. 25 homers, 69 RBIs, 71 runs scored. He's got a 253 ISO. And, I mean, this guy, everyone knows him as a lefty masher, but the guy's been hitting righties really well. Especially at home, though. He has really significant splits home to road. So that's not to say not to play him on the road, but when he's priced like he is at the Rogers Center, it's pretty tough to play him on the road because he's had a pretty big drop-off in production right from there.
Yeah, definitely. I'll mention another guy that's had a similar problem. Todd Frazier has been absolutely fantastic at Cincinnati, and especially against lefties, but he struggled a bit on the road. And he's been really tough to play because, like you mentioned with Donaldson, his price just doesn't come down enough when he's on the road. And He has a ridiculous 289 ISO though, 27 home runs, 67 RBI. I think I just saw Jay Bruce got traded over the weekend, so I mean that's going to be a tough for him because there's not going to be anything behind him anymore. It's going to be the really tough part. With no Bruce, even with Bruce struggling, he was at least a bat behind him. And it's going to be tough to see what they do to protect him at all because he might see a lot less pitches to hit. He only has a 6.8 walk rate going into the post-trade deadline here, and it's going to be tough to see just how effective he can be with teams pitching around him more. Similar problem that we've seen all year with Evan Longoria, only hitting 266 on the year with 11 home runs. His walk rate's 8.8, and he's striking out a decent amount because teams don't have to pitch him in the strike zone because there's nobody in that Rays lineup to protect him, and I'm really worried about Frazier experiencing that same issue. Yeah. Some guys on the lower side, we mentioned Valbuena every single time. He's still only hitting 198, but he has 19 home runs, a 214 ISO. Guy's just a crazy GPP play against weak righties. Outside of that, I have a really hard time using him, even though he's hitting fourth or fifth in the lineup most of the time for the Astros.
Yeah. Another guy who's been really struggling recently, he's been a big-time disappointment, despite 338 batting average on balls in play. Chris Bryant down to just 248 on the year. I mean, he's having batted ball success. He's walking 13% of the time, which you like, but still striking out almost 31% of the time. So, I mean, he has upside, but what he hasn't been is consistent. So I've been seeing, there's been some nights where I played him in cash games, things like that, but until I see some more consistency or his price continues to be way too low, I mean, he's just not a guy I love playing in cash games. But a guy who has had way too cheap a price tag right now, Matt Carpenter, 261, really was struggling, had a double dong game the other day. He's still walking 13.1% of the time. He'd got his demotion down to, I believe he was batting 7th there for a little while. He should be back near the top of the order, I would assume. And any time that he is, he makes for a great cash game play.
Definitely.
Outfield options, Bryce Harper. I mean, it's still Bryce Harper. It's he and Paul Goldschmidt as far as top hitters in the NL. It's not even close. 335 batting average. He's got 373 batting average on balls in play, but I'm sure that's not going to go down a whole lot because, I mean, we see how hard this guy hits the ball. I mean, singles turn into doubles turn into home runs. The guy's got a ton of power. His ISO at 354 is just out of this world. Mike Trout not too far behind, though, at 315. They got 29 and 31 homers, respectively. Trout not 100% right now, but it doesn't seem like too much of a concern with his wrist, so I'm sure he'll be fine as well.
Yeah, I'll mention a batting average guy at the top here. Gerardo Parra got traded on Friday. I hope he still hits at the top of the lineup because he's just having an incredible season right now. A 189 ISO for a guy with only 9 home runs is pretty amazing. Also hitting 328, 369 on base percentage, 517 slugging. I mean, the guy's just having a great season. 9 stolen bases, too. Hopefully he remains in the top 2 of the order. So he gets a ton of at-bats still because he's just been a fantastic play lately. A couple other guys having really nice seasons. Billy Burns hitting 303 still with 21 steals. Obviously not a big RBI guy, but he's been a great cash game play for most of the season, even though his price has gone way up recently. It would be nice to see it kind of even out a little bit so he becomes a little bit more playable. Another guy that I've been playing probably too much is Andrew McCutchen, but he's having a fairly nice year. He's kind of stuck in that like Jose Abreu mode where like everything looks fine, but as far as DFS goes, he just hasn't been a great play a lot of times because a lot of his big games have come in tough spots, and he's had a lot of bad games in spots where he should have really nice ones. But a 197 ISO, 294 batting average, 65 RBI, 5 stolen bases, a little disappointing for a guy with as much speed as he has, but I think he's going to be another guy that kind of breaks out a little bit in the second half and has a nice second half.
Yeah, it seems like most nights Starling Marte a similar play to him. I mean, he's putting up the type of numbers we expected McCutchen to put up with his 20 steals. Really similar numbers everywhere else. A few less RBI, a few less runs scored. But, I mean, that's been – when I want to get exposure to the Pirates and I can't afford McCutchen, I usually just roll with Marte. Yep. I'm sure you have the same thinking also. Michael Brantley's been another one of those guys. Been really cheap on FanDuel. Not so much on DraftKings. I mean, he's having a fine season, but nowhere near what we expected out of him. I mean, you love the fact that he's good cash game play because he does walk 11.4% of the time, just strikes out 7.4%. But we mentioned that offense. I mean, there's just not a lot going for their offense. Not a lot of RBI chances, not a lot of chances to score runs either. So that's concerning. And then Going down a little bit further, JD Martinez, 264 ISO. He's up to 27 homers on the year. He's having a huge season. And then you talk about a guy who's been absolutely on fire recently, Carlos Gonzalez. After a terrible start to the season, he's a guy that everyone's talking about as, huge disappointment, what a letdown. And, ever since probably a couple weeks before the All-Star break, I want to say he's got like 12 home runs in that span. And he's up to 21 on the season now. So... Yep. He's definitely a great GPP target, even away from Coors Field. Looking at the bottom here, there's a couple guys we'll mention before we get out of here, and guys that you just aren't worth playing. I'll start with the guy that is worth playing. Gregory Polanco, after a really bad start of the season, really starting to get it going. The guy's hitting a ton of doubles. He's stealing bases. Back to the top of that Pirates order. Seems like his confidence is back. His numbers overall don't look good, but I'm taking advantage of the discount right now with him.
Yeah, definitely. He's a great option there. Like you mentioned, the price is still based on his season-long numbers, and he's just been a totally different player since the All-Star break. Up to 17 steals on the year. His ISO's up to 116, which doesn't sound amazing, but considering it was sitting at about 0.67 like a month ago, yep. It's a pretty incredible improvement he's made. And like you said, a couple guys that haven't been worth playing. You mentioned Brandon Moss got traded at the trade deadline, hitting only 215. He does have 15 home runs and 50 RBI, but I don't think he's going to be used nearly as much now that he's not on the power-strapped Indians. Another guy down there, Jock Peterson, has been moved down to 6th or 7th in the order quite a bit over the last couple days, only hitting 225. He's actually been hitting a little bit better since he got moved down there, but 21 home runs. It's been a long time since he put together a nice streak with a bunch of home runs, only 43 RBI. Part of that is because he was hitting leadoff for so long that you get a lot less RBI chances in the National League in that spot. But, he just hasn't been worth playing even at his discounted price lately.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that's going to wrap things up. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out all of our great content at dailyfantasycafe.com.